My name is Eva, and there was a time when I believed my life was perfectly in order. I had a prestigious role as the head of marketing, a devoted husband named Caleb, and the financial stability that many only dream of. Paying off our mortgage on my own was something I took immense pride in, as it reinforced my sense of independence and accomplishment. Family was always a priority, and Caleb's younger brother, Felix, along with their mother, Regina, were deeply woven into our lives. Since their father had passed away years before, the strong bond between the two brothers and their mother had always stood out to me. I admired Caleb even more for his unwavering loyalty to his family. At first, Regina seemed to accept me with open arms. She often asked about my job at family gatherings, occasionally nodding and saying, "Marketing, huh? Sounds important." It was reassuring to feel acknowledged and included by Caleb's family, and I eagerly anticipated becoming a true part of their close-knit world. The early years of our marriage were filled with joyful weekends, celebratory dinners, and impromptu game nights that made me feel at home. One particular Thanksgiving at Regina's remains vivid in my memory: the warm laughter, the lively conversations, and the overwhelming sense of belonging. But everything began to shift during a New Year's Eve gathering at her house. While refilling my wine glass in the kitchen, I happened to overhear a conversation that made my stomach drop. Regina was in the living room, openly ridiculing Clara's budget-friendly dress, scoffing at her efforts as a single mother trying to blend in with the wealthy crowd. That moment cracked the image I had painted of their family dynamic. What I had once brushed off as harmless teasing began to take on a more malicious tone. Over time, I started noticing a pattern: Regina, Caleb, and Felix huddling together, whispering and laughing at the expense of family and friends. The snide remarks, the underhanded comments, all became harder to ignore. It all came to a head one Easter Sunday. Regina was casually belittling a relative's financial decisions, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. I rose to my feet, calling her out, hoping to stand up for those who had no voice in these conversations. The room fell into an uncomfortable hush, and Regina, her tone sharp as a blade, dismissed my words as an overreaction. I turned to Caleb, expecting support, but his silence was deafening. That moment changed everything. Family gatherings, once filled with warmth, now felt suffocating. I often found myself sitting alone, sipping a drink while Caleb remained by his mother's side. He would occasionally cast an apologetic glance my way, but he never stepped in, never defended me. One evening, after yet another tense dinner, I confronted him. "Why can't you ever stand up to her?" The frustration that had been simmering for so long finally spilled over. Caleb sighed, rubbing a hand through his hair. "She's my mother, Eva. What do you expect me to do?" "I expect you to tell her she's being cruel." "I expect you to stand by me," I shot back. But he never did. And with time, I began finding excuses to skip these painful gatherings: urgent work calls, sudden headaches, anything to avoid the cold stares and whispered judgments. Just when I thought things couldn't get more strained, life threw us an unexpected twist. I was pregnant. Holding the test in my trembling hands, I called for Caleb. He rushed in, concern etched across his face. The moment he saw the results, his expression flickered between shock and something that almost resembled relief. For a fleeting second, I allowed myself to hope that this new chapter might heal the cracks between us. But the pregnancy was far from easy. Nausea and dizziness became constant companions, and with the looming risk of miscarriage, I was placed on strict bed rest. Eventually, I had to leave my job entirely. As my condition worsened, another complication emerged: my vision began to deteriorate, a rare but frightening side effect. Caleb, instead of drawing closer, seemed to drift further away, coming home later and later, sometimes not at all. I faced my struggles alone. When my scheduled C-section was moved up due to my worsening eyesight, I was overwhelmed with a mix of fear and anticipation. As I lay on the operating table, I asked for Caleb. A nurse hesitated before telling me he had chosen to wait outside. The surgery went smoothly, and the sound of my son's first cries filled me with an indescribable sense of love. But the joy was fleeting. When Caleb finally walked into the recovery room, his expression was unreadable: discomfort, frustration, something else I couldn't quite name. "Eva, we need to talk." "This isn't right," he said abruptly, his voice laced with disapproval. He dismissed the necessity of my surgery, insisting that men shouldn't be present for childbirth, clinging to outdated beliefs that cut deep. Before I could even process his words, he turned on his heel and walked out, claiming he couldn't handle the hospital atmosphere. I was left alone, cradling my newborn son, reeling not just from the pain of surgery but from the realization that the man I had married, the man I had once admired, had abandoned me in the moment I needed him most. The weeks that followed blurred into endless nights of exhaustion, with Caleb becoming more of a ghost in our home. I was left to shoulder the weight of new motherhood alone. Ever since our son's birth, Caleb had barely lifted a finger to help and instead seemed more irritated than anything. "Can you shut him up?" he snapped one night, as our baby's cries filled the room. "I'm trying," I murmured, my body aching from fatigue. "He's teething, Caleb. It hurts him." But Caleb had no patience for any of it. "All you do is focus on the kid. What about me? What about our sex life?" His words stunned me. I was still healing from surgery, surviving on mere scraps of sleep, and yet, he was more concerned about his own needs than the struggles I was enduring. As the months dragged on, his resentment only grew. One evening, while I rocked our fussy 7-month-old, Caleb cut in bluntly. "You need to go back to work." I looked up at him, shocked. "What? But the baby?" "We'll hire a nanny," he interrupted, his tone firm. "We can't keep living like this, Eva. We need the money." I wanted to argue that our son needed me, that I wasn't ready, but the cold finality in his eyes left no room for discussion. With a heavy heart, I started looking for a job. Finding work was no easy feat, especially with my vision problems. Eventually, I secured a position at a smaller company, though the pay was far less than what I had earned before. When I told Caleb, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "That's it?" he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Caleb. My eyesight." "Excuses," he muttered before walking away. And just like that, my new reality set in, waking up early, rushing off to work with a pit in my stomach, leaving my baby behind, struggling through my job with my failing vision, only to come home to a resentful husband and a child who needed me more than ever. Time marched on in an endless loop of stress and exhaustion. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since my son was born. Despite everything, I found endless joy in watching him grow, celebrating his little milestones. But family gatherings remained a source of tension, especially with Regina. She played the role of the doting grandmother when others were around, but when it was just us, her indifference was evident. "Come to Grandma," she cooed, arms outstretched. But my son clung to me, turning his face away from a woman he barely knew. Regina's expression soured. "What have you been telling him about me?" she hissed, suspicion lacing her voice. "Nothing," I sighed, exhausted. "He just doesn't know you well, Regina. If you visited more often." "Don't you dare blame this on me," she snapped, before stomping off to complain to Caleb. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my world shifted again. Holding a pregnancy test in trembling hands, my pulse pounded as I stared at the positive result. A wave of fear crashed over me. My first pregnancy had nearly broken me, physically and emotionally. Could my body even handle another one? As I calculated the dates, my breath caught in my throat. I was already deep into my first trimester. Felt like the decision had been made without me. With shaking hands, I called Caleb at work. "What is it?" he answered, sounding impatient. "Caleb, My voice faltered. A long silence stretched before he finally spoke. His tone clipped and indifferent. "Look, Eva, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just don't quit your job. Okay? We can't afford that." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the weight of loneliness pressing down on me like never before. Thankfully, this pregnancy wasn't as brutal as the first. My morning sickness was manageable, and my vision remained stable enough for me to keep working. I was determined to provide for my children, no matter what. But as my belly grew, so did the distance between Caleb and me. He spent more and more time at Regina's house, coming home late, if at all. One evening, completely drained from juggling a toddler and my pregnancy, I turned to him as he walked through the door. "Hey, could you read him a story? I'm really tired." Caleb glanced at us, then checked his watch. "Can't. I promised Mom I'd help her move some furniture. Don't wait up." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me alone with our son and a crushing sense of abandonment. By the time my 7th month rolled around, Thanksgiving was fast approaching. Guests started arriving in the afternoon, the house buzzing with lively conversation. John and Mary immediately pitched in to help, filling the space with warmth. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. Felix, Caleb's younger brother, stepped inside, but this time he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Serafina," Felix announced, introducing his fiancée. The room instantly brightened with congratulations and cheerful chatter. Regina arrived shortly after, her eyes lighting up the moment she saw Serafina. During dinner, she practically fawned over her. "Tell me about your job, dear. You're a manager at a national bank, right?" Serafina nodded, smiling. "How prestigious." Regina gushed, clearly impressed. And just like that, it was obvious who had her favor now. Regina's voice rang out, sharp and deliberate, ensuring the entire room caught every word. "Serafina here makes $220,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always envisioned, brilliant, gorgeous, and accomplished." Her eyes flicked toward me, her meaning crystal clear. Then, with a honeyed tone, she twisted the knife deeper. "Unlike some people who seem to think popping out babies is a life goal." My stomach knotted, my face burning with shame. Mary, standing beside me, stiffened, her body tensing as if ready to leap to my defense. But I touched her arm, silently urging her to let it go. Regina, of course, wasn't finished. Smiling sweetly, she chirped, "Why don't we all head to that trendy new restaurant downtown? My treat." Before I could fully register what was happening, Regina, Caleb, Felix, and Serafina were already heading for the door. Caleb didn't hesitate, didn't glance back, didn't offer a single word. The warmth of the evening dissipated, and soon the remaining guests made their polite exits, one by one. Only John and Mary lingered, their presence a small comfort in the now empty, silent house. They offered to stay to help, but I waved them off, assuring them I'd be fine. The moment they left, the dam broke. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming, grief pressing down on me like a crushing weight. The night stretched on, my quiet sobs the only sound in the house. My hand rested on my swollen belly as my mind spiraled, wondering how my life had come to this. Just as dawn's first light crept through the windows, the front door creaked open. Caleb stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, his clothes wrinkled from a long night out. He didn't speak. He didn't even acknowledge me. Without a word, he staggered into our bedroom, shutting the door behind him. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, scrolling absently through social media. And then I saw it. A series of glossy photos, Regina, Caleb, Felix, and Serafina beaming at a high-end nightclub. The caption hit like a slap across the face, "Best Thanksgiving ever with my real family." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. My due date was fast approaching, and while I tried to focus on the joy of welcoming my baby, doubts about Caleb loomed over me like a storm cloud. One frigid afternoon, I walked into our bedroom to find Caleb unpacking bags of brand-new summer clothes. My brows furrowed. "What's all this?" "Saw a good sale," he muttered, keeping his eyes averted. "Figured I'd freshen up my wardrobe." Something about the way he said it set me on edge. But with the baby nearly here, I forced myself to let it go. I had been careful with money, making sure we had enough for our mortgage, our bills, and a babysitter for our 4-year-old. My job had granted me 3 months of unpaid leave, and I had planned everything down to the last detail. Then, 5 days before my scheduled C-section, everything crumbled. I was resting when Caleb and Regina burst into the room, their energy charged with urgency. I followed them to our bedroom, watching as Caleb threw clothes into a suitcase with frantic efficiency. My pulse quickened. "What are you doing?" "We're heading to Felix's wedding in Hawaii," he said flatly. My breath hitched. "My C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" Caleb zipped his suitcase shut, barely looking at me. "You always figure it out." And with that, he and Regina were gone, the door slamming behind them. My legs felt weak as I rushed to check our joint bank account. Nothing. Every dollar I had saved was gone. Panic clawed at my throat as I called Caleb. When he finally answered, his voice was laced with irritation. "What?" "The money," I whispered. "Where is it?" There was a pause, then a cruel chuckle. "We needed it for Felix's wedding gift." "Don't be so dramatic, Eva." The line went dead. And then a searing pain ripped through my abdomen. I looked down, horror gripping me as a warm puddle spread across the floor. My water had broken. A wave of panic crashed over me. My body wasn't ready for labor. The scar from my last C-section made this dangerous, life-threatening. With shaking hands, I dialed emergency services. The hospital was a blur of rushing doctors and blaring monitors. The last thing I remembered was someone calling my name before everything faded to black. When I woke, the steady beeping of machines filled the air. Mary sat beside me, her eyes swollen and red. "Eva," she murmured, squeezing my hand. You're safe. The baby's safe. Reality hit me all at once. I had nearly died. My child had nearly been lost. And Caleb? He hadn't called. Not once. 5 days passed. My strength returned faster than expected, surprising even the doctors. They cleared me to go home, but home wasn't an option. Not anymore. Caleb had never checked on me. He hadn't asked about his newborn son. And in that silence, I knew what I had to do. I called John and Mary, asking if I could stay with them for a while. Without hesitation, they opened their home to me and the boys, giving me the love and security I so desperately needed. As they showered their grandsons with affection, I took a breath, gathered my strength, and started making calls. Divorce lawyers, financial advisors, a fresh start. A week later, my phone rang. Caleb. I ignored the first 5 calls. On the 6th, I answered. His voice was sharp, demanding. Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home? I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. I'm with my parents, with our sons. And Caleb? I filed for divorce. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and ridicule. Divorce? Are you serious? After everything I've done for you? He let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Everything you've done? I shot back, my anger flaring. Like abandoning me right before I gave birth? Or emptying our savings? He scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, get over it. I'll pay you back, no big deal. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Then, with a smug grin, he continued, and you know why? Because I'm about to be rich. He launched into a rant about some golden opportunity, a financial venture orchestrated by Felix's new wife, Serafina, who had supposedly promised him untold wealth. You never believed in me, Eva, he spat. You always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now. And you? You're just a bitter woman who couldn't see an opportunity if it hit her in the face. The divorce went through faster than I expected. Caleb barely put up a fight. He returned the money he had taken and agreed to pay alimony. Since I had been the one covering the mortgage, with years of bank statements to prove it, the judge had no trouble awarding me the house. The day I officially moved back in, Caleb was there, gathering the last of his things. He sneered as I walked through the door, my baby in one arm and my toddler holding my other hand. Enjoy this dump while you can, he jeered, hoisting a box onto his shoulder. I'll be living in a mansion soon, swimming in money. You'll regret everything. As he walked out, a weight lifted off my shoulders. The house suddenly felt bigger, lighter, free of his presence. A year and a half later, my life had settled into a steady rhythm. I had gone back to work, balancing my career with raising my boys. It wasn't always easy, but we were happy, healthy, and moving forward. Then, on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my heart pound. Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in financial ruin. I read the article in disbelief. Serafina had been running an elaborate scam. She convinced Caleb, Felix, and Regina to invest in a non-existent financial firm, persuading them to take out enormous loans. They even mortgaged Regina's house, funneling everything they had into what turned out to be nothing but a fantasy. Serafina, as it turned out, had never been a banker. The sleek office she had shown them was nothing more than a rented space, an elaborate prop for her deception. By the time the truth came to light, she had vanished, taking millions with her and leaving behind nothing but forged documents and devastated lives. As if that wasn't bad enough, I learned they had also taken out another loan just to fund Felix and Serafina's extravagant wedding in Hawaii, the very wedding Caleb had abandoned me to attend. As I processed the news, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Shock, disbelief, and, if I'm being honest, a small sense of vindication. The aftermath was catastrophic. Buried under insurmountable debt, they lost everything. Regina's house was repossessed, their cars seized, even their personal belongings stripped away by creditors. Word got around that Regina had taken a job as a cashier, barely scraping by to afford a small apartment and groceries. Caleb and Felix, once so convinced of their impending fortune, were now penniless, their dreams of success reduced to nothing more than wishful thinking. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of gratitude that I had walked away when I did. I had saved myself and my children from the financial disaster that swallowed them whole. Just when I thought I had put it all behind me, my phone rang. Regina's number flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Eva? Her voice was small, uncertain, a far cry from the confident, condescending tone I once knew. We need your help, she said, hesitation laced in her words. The children need their father. They need their grandmother. You can't just turn your back on family in times like this. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with memories. The cruel Thanksgiving remarks. The loneliness of pregnancy, abandoned and struggling. The times they mocked and dismissed me. Family? My voice was steady, firm. You weren't thinking about family when you left me alone, pregnant and vulnerable. You didn't care about family when you helped steal my savings. You didn't care about family when you treated me like I was nothing. Regina tried to interject, but I wasn't finished. I'm sorry for what you're going through, but your choices led you here. Caleb, Felix, you all made your decisions. My priority is my children, and I won't bring them into the chaos you created. Please don't contact us again. I ended the call and blocked her number. As I set my phone down, a wave of peace settled over me. It was over. Finally, truly over.